Hey Ian, are you ready for the Q&A?
Hey Josh, and yeah, I gotta say, I really like what you've done with the studio.
Thanks. Does it excite you?
What?
So I've been thinking hard about trying to make these streams more exciting, you know, so people enjoy watching them more. Like, I was playing on my shaman the other day, and something happened that made me realize that I think people would like the streams more if they were more exciting.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty exciting, yeah. So, what's the plan for today? Are we gonna talk about the... Whoa, what's happening?
Oh, don't worry, that's just a change of camera angle. It makes it more exciting.
Oh, okay. How many camera angles are there?
312.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Cool, I'm glad you think so. Wait until you see the explosions.
The what?
Both of our chairs are fitted with remote detonating explosive charges, and if the AI decides the stream is too boring, then they'll blow a couple up.
Jesus Christ, Josh, that's insane!
Research shows it's good for the metrics. Oh, and another thing, we're not doing this Q&A as Ian and Josh.
What do you mean?
People don't find us exciting enough. So I got one of these transmorpher beacons, which will turn us into a random boss from the game.
I guess bosses are more exciting?
Exactly. Maybe you'll turn into a high elf.
Oh, don't be stupid, Josh. High elves don't exist. Oh, great. Actually, I think this is a pretty good idea, Josh. This will be a really fun stream.
Thanks. I'll just change myself and then we're good to go. Oh, well, that was unexpected.
Quick, put the spoiler warning up.
I think we got away with it. Hey, that was pretty exciting.
Knowledge is power.
Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to another weekly reset, Taliesin and Evitel's Wondrous Wisdom Show, which this week, I'm afraid to say, is an incredibly misleading title. Not because this show isn't full of wisdom, you know, because it most certainly is, but because this is a show lacking Evitel, seeing as she's going off to an IRL museum conference this weekend while this show is being made. So apologies in advance, but it is only me this time out. And yes, I know what you're thinking, but Taliesin, I literally just saw Evitel in the intro. That's because we were clever and recorded that before she left. Because there is that Q&A to talk about, the drama that unfolded around the Welcome Back weekend, the esports funding toys, and that new wave of player bans, as well as some actual game stuff too, all of which we are obviously going to cover now. And when I say we, I of course mean me, and when I say now, I of course mean after, the reason I know you're all really here, World First Watch, the epic battle for raid progress between the very best guilds in the world, called Immortalis. And you will definitely remember that last time we left the race delicately poised with our Immortalis Argent Dawn EU, leading on progress and on the cusp of World First Jaina heroic curve, yet still trailing behind Vox Immortalis, boo, in the world rankings due to their earlier single mythic kill, but who were stuck at heroic Rastakhan, or should I say Rastakant? Well, no, actually I can't say that, because the evil German Immortalis turned up the heat next raid night by defeating the Zandalari King, and by the way, since then they have also taken down Mechatalk and Stormwall Blockade, so you know, yikes. With the pressure on, the brave, valiant force for good Immortalis extended our lockout because, truth be told, there are a couple of bosses back there that we really didn't feel like wiping to again numerous times on the reclear, and started our Thursday raid night at Jaina, with a few players missing and a few that weren't there the last time, and thusly we took on the final boss of the raid. It was tense, it was focused, but in the end, I am proud to report that Immortalis Argent Dawn EU did, in fact, get curve and secure the world first heroic Jaina kill out of all of the guilds on the entire planet called Immortalis. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Vox Immortalis, for being good sports and going along with our stupid meme. And Red Bull, if you could send all your sponsorship offers through the proper channels, that would be very much appreciated. Thanks. But that's not all. Since our epic victory, we've also completed the Glory achievement, and buoyed and flushed from our amazing success, we thought, hey, why don't we go for the full house and beat Vox Immortalis in the world rankings too by jumping into Mythic and killing 2 bosses. At which point we spent the rest of the night wiping to Jadefire Masters, so we're not going to talk about that much, even though I think we would all agree that objectively we are the best guild in the world, with a name a bit like Immortalis. Our German cousins are still ahead of us in the world rankings. So although we're not going to be keeping track of this race every week anymore, know that this isn't over until 8.2. We'll keep you posted. Whew! And I know that after all of that excitement, any other news is going to feel small and unimportant, but let's try, because there is actually quite a lot to get through this week, and I think we're going to try and approach the order of events in order, because that seems logical. And so we'll start with actually the only surviving news from last week's unaired episode, which is the confirmed release date for patch 8.2. And I know what you're thinking, but Taliesin, there isn't a confirmed release date for 8.2 yet, you clickbait shill man bastard shill. But whoa, hold up, because genuinely, I think Blizzard have specifically told us. It's all to do with that Magni quest that went live in 8.1.5. You complete some story, you kill some old gods, and then Mother starts an analysis program and tells you that there'll be more to do when the analysis is finished, in approximately 77 cycles. Now, many people have taken this as just a jokey reference to the 77-day Legion patch cycle, but after thinking about it for 10 seconds, I honestly think it's more than that. Mother is literally telling you to come back for a new quest in 77 days, which frankly I am genuinely taking to mean that Blizzard intend 8.2 to go live on the 28th of May 2019, because I am rational. I've done the science on this, guys, and you can't argue with science. Get ready for Ashara fun times just before June. This is now a fact set in stone, and I reserve the right to be very pissed off with Blizz if it doesn't now go live as I've decided it will. And yeah, sorry to drop that bombshell on you and move on, but listen, there is a lot to get through this week, so we are not dicking around, okay? So let's get around to this week's news, beginning with the Welcome Back weekend, the new promotional offer which allows lapsed players to return to the game for free this weekend. Maybe this is you. Maybe you're taking the opportunity to stick your head round the door of 8.1.5 and see what's what. And maybe my face is on your second monitor right now, because this video will come out on Sunday and it's probably taken you that long to download the game files. And you know where there's plenty of people like you right now? On the forums, which were buzzing with players excited about being able to log on for a bit, because why the heck not? Whether you get to play some new content you've heard about, or say hi to some random friends in game, or shit, maybe you just want to sit in Grizzly Hills and chill for a bit, and honestly, that's probably the first thing I'd do if I've been away for a while. You got nothing to lose, and for the rest of us, well, it probably didn't even register on our radar, because it's not like, no, it was a shit show. Obviously. Desperation! This is pathetic. This makes me feel sick to my stomach. This isn't Blizzard. This just isn't Blizzard. This reeks of corporate money-grubbing greed. Blizzard isn't Blizzard anymore. I can taste Blizzard's desperation. Enjoy the steaming pile of shit that WoW has become, you masochists. You see what I did? I know that people that watch this show on the regular will probably have noticed how I've been a little bit mischievous there, because actually, no, those aren't forum comments about this weekend. They're actually talking about the free 3-day BFA trial from October 2018. I was just being silly, sorry. Let's do this properly. Subs must be down if they're having to do this. Sam, the bad press must be hitting Blizzard hard. Okay, stop. I'm sorry. This is also me being silly, because I can't lie to you anymore, internet. Actually, these comments are from the Welcome Back weekend offer from June 2018. And again, I'm sorry to mislead you, just to labour a rhetorical point. So these really are from this week, I promise. They really are reaching new lows. A game from decades ago, groundbreaking. Free weekend for all, but it's really cynical. As you can see, these comments are completely different and relevant, and there's a couple that I find actually genuinely interesting. The idea that this is a cynical move from Blizzard. I mean, if other free game time offers are, as we've seen, a sign of desperation and a dying game, what's different about this one that makes it cynical? Exactly. Now, this comment is actually the title of a video, which I'll link below so you can watch it yourself and make sure I'm not misrepresenting it, but the gist of it seems to be there's nothing that's changed since the game's come out. They haven't done anything content-wise to change, and this is why it's cynical, because if they legitimately cared about wanting you to return to the game because they've made changes, this is when you do that, which genuinely is something I find very confusing, because that stuff, the game not changing, there being nothing new, those are perfectly reasonable and legitimately valid reasons for not liking the game right now, but I honestly don't see how it makes a free weekend cynical. In fact, if anything, I'd say it's the opposite, because if it is true that there's nothing new in the game, which I personally don't agree with anyway. If you stop playing before 8.1, for example, then there's a whole ton of genuinely good story content to play through. There's an all-time classic raid, there's Brawler's Guild, there's the incursion events, all perfect ways to fill a free weekend. But whatever, actually that's irrelevant. Let's say, okay, there's nothing new in the game. So why is allowing lapsed subscribers a free weekend to see for themselves how there's nothing new in the game cynical? Cynical would be trying to keep that from the players in the hope that they see a cool new Jaina and Bane cinematic or lovely round new allied races and pay money to resub, only to find out then that there's nothing new after they've paid their money. But a free weekend is doing the opposite. They're saying, here, come and see how there is nothing new in this game for free. No need to take a chance and resub for a whole month. Look, there's nothing here. It's just the same old shit that we had on day one. And you can't even play those cool new trolls that you like the look of because, as you can see, since we let you play for free, they are locked behind a rep grind that you haven't done. Just as well we let you play for free instead of you not knowing that and wasting $15 on a sub that you'd later regret, eh? And this is something I find myself repeating so much. Criticism is good, but it needs to be accurate criticism. If they haven't made changes or added anything new, then letting people back in for a free weekend might be foolish. Yeah, it might be commercially naive, but I really don't see how it's cynical. If you want to cynically trick players into resubbing to your game that you haven't added anything new to, don't let them be able to experience the lack of changes for free without resubbing. Shitting hell, Blizz, you can't even do cynical right. You are the absolute worst. Don't worry, Blizzard, I'm only joking because I know you can do cynical. Like I say, it's perfectly reasonable to not like BFA because you don't think they've added or improved anything since launch. That's a perfectly valid assessment. But imagine being so personally offended by that you call a free weekend cynical. I'm rambling here, so here it is boiled down. Having a free weekend for a game isn't cynical because the game is shit. In fact, letting people play your game for free is consumer friendly, especially if you think the game is shit, because that's the kind of thing you want to know as a consumer before you spend more money to find out. And just to be super duper extra specially clear here, this does not mean that your reasons for disliking the game are wrong. It means your specific criticism of this offer being cynical is wrong, because that's not what cynical means. If I had more time, I might even suggest that what is cynical is not liking or playing a game, but making constant videos about it because they're still the ones that make you the most money. But I don't have time for such musings because we are not dicking around, remember? Remember, we are not dicking around. So moving on, also this week was the new PvP brawl, Comp Stomp, which sees players take on a team of AI opponents in the new remastered Arathi Basin. And okay, so we don't often bother with PvP brawls on this show because, well, you know. But this one is of particular interest to me because I'm fascinated by Blizzard's AI adventures, and in my ideal future that I've just made up in my head, Blizz will eventually roll this technology out to open world elite mobs or world bosses who, instead of just standing still waiting for you to turn up and kill them, instead hunt you down as you're going about world quests or something. But it's fair to say that if the developers are capable of that, they haven't put it into Comp Stomp, because basically this is just really easy. Look, I generally PvP on Alliance, so if there's one thing I'm used to, okay, it's getting completely owned in Arathi Basin, which is how I know for sure that these computer-controlled horde guides had literally no idea what they were doing. And don't get me wrong, it was really nice to tell Evitel that I just won 5 battlegrounds in a row, and maybe forgetting to tell her about the whole AI thing. But if this is going to be a serious game mode in the future, then something is going to have to change, because at the moment, the most pain these bots are going to cause the other team is massive jealousy about how they don't have to follow conventional naming rules. I mean, come on. Groomer Bloodpelt? Downwind Dory? Gazlek? All I can say is this had better be a preview of upcoming new customization options, Blizz, because I should not be this envious of a team that I just totally owned in PvP, you know? This is not the proud, warm glow that I was expecting. But moving on, no dicking around, this week also saw the release of those 2 esports toys that Blizzard first mentioned a month or 2 ago. The very first cash shop toys, which will help to generate revenue for the final prize pool of the WoW esports events at BlizzCon. I said when we first heard about this that we really needed more details before we could discuss it properly, and here we are. The most obviously apparent clarification is that, thank goodness, the toys themselves aren't the faction-themed toy boats that WoW had originally speculated, but instead a faction firework that you launch from the corpse of your fallen foe, if you can cast it on them before they release, which, you know, good luck with that. Which is fine. And the transmorpher beacon, which when used will summon an ethereal, which a whole group can then use to change your appearances into various dungeon and raid bosses for 20 minutes on a 1 hour cooldown. And look, I'm not being funny, okay, but before now, my favourite toy was always the coin of many faces, and this is 10 times better than that, which basically means that this is the best toy ever in the game, because you can randomly turn into Elisand, or Blackhand, or King Ymiron, for goodness sake. And the best thing isn't even that you look like them, it's that you randomly shout out their voice lines when you kill enemies, which is ridiculous. And look, I know it's very unlikely because he's probably far too big with not enough animations, but every time I use this beacon, which I do on all my characters pretty much on cooldown, I always have my fingers crossed for Osrook, so I can tell everyone to break yourselves upon my body. And one day that might happen, and when it does, that'd be $10 well spent, frankly. And look, you know how I feel about the cash shop, okay? I don't like it. I don't believe it should exist for a subscription game, and if I could snap my fingers and get rid of it instantly, then I would. It still doesn't work, don't blame me. And the fact that I can also acknowledge that it's not nearly as intrusive or influential to gameplay as the shops in most other MMOs doesn't change my opinion. And yeah, I know I was joking about $10 well spent, but really $10 is probably too much for these, isn't it? Especially the fireworks, because they're fun, but you know. But at least that money you're spending is helping to fund esports, right? Or 25% of that money is, right? Like League of Legends and Dota 2 do, right? That gives it a good reason to exist though, right? Well, that was definitely the opinion on the forums, where excitement about the cool new toys quickly gave way into a thorough and fascinating discussion into the economics of no, it was a shit show, obviously. Fist you, Blizzard, greedy fish bastards, can't even pay for your own tournament. I find this offensive, personally. My disgust at the audacity of this move will linger for a while. Support Blizzard's pocket more like. This stuff is pretty scumlord level of embarrassing and greedy. Why not have 100% of the proceeds go to the pool so you can reach the amount quicker? And in fairness, that is a very important point that needs clarifying, because there clearly is still some misunderstanding about this. Let's be clear, if not one single person buys these toys, the prize pool at BlizzCon will still be $500,000. They're not holding you to ransom. That already exists. It is budgeted for and doesn't rely on the sale of these toys to happen. People describe this as crowdfunding, which it is, but it's not a GoFundMe. The prize will be there no matter what the sales. One thing though that hasn't been explained properly, I feel, is whether that 25% of the proceeds from the toys goes straight to increasing the $500,000 final prize pool, or if, as I suspect, the first 200,000 toys sold go into filling that pool, and then any sales after that will increase it. That hasn't been made completely clear, and I think we'd all like to know because it will affect how I feel about this whole operation. Then there's the question of the ethics behind a shop toy funding esports at all, and the fact that 25% feels a bit, well, stingy. Doesn't it, really? I mean, it's not a surprise. 25% is the established precedent as a percentage for specific microtransactions to fund an esports tournament. It's the percentage that Dota 2 and League of Legends use for their prize pool, so it was always a pretty safe bet that 25% would be the number that Blizzard were going to land on. And yes, it is totally true that Dota and League are free-to-play games, even if no one who actually plays either of those games properly really plays them for free, do they? If you have 1,000 hours logged on League, then statistically, you've probably spent anything between $200 and $6,000 on it. But I do totally accept it as a criticism in WoW's case, and it probably would have been a smart move for Blizzard to outbid those two games in the proportion of sales that go into the prize pool because of that. There is the counter argument that unlike League or Dota, WoW has a lot more other ways of playing than just as a competitive team game, and actually many or most players would be glad that their subscription money isn't being spent on esports and that there's an alternative way of funding that stuff. An argument that I don't really go along with, even if I do completely understand it. In the end, how we all end up feeling about this is probably going to have to do with how much those prize pools end up at. Like, if it's $510,000, people will remember that stingy 25% figure a lot more than they would if the toys end up raising a prize pool of like $2 million or something. I don't think there are going to be too many esports teams complaining about the fact that they're probably going to win more money because of this. And if it's okay with SCO, then it's okay with me, you know? Except going to the gym every day. That's not okay with me. That can suck a big one. But careful, because we almost started dicking around then, and there's no dicking around, because next up was Ian and Law's Q&A, in which Ian and Law tried to hide the fact that there was no cool 8.2 PTR announcement, like many of us expected, by blowing our tiny minds with hardcore production value sumptuousness. And I think I know why the esports toys exist, guys, because look, this is where your sub money is going. Check out the new studio and the new multiple camera angles and Ian's new floppy haircut that for some reason always makes me think of Spider-Man 3. And if that weren't enough sauce, check out game director Ian Hazzakostas showing off exposed ankle like he's some kind of floozy. When did you become such a floozy, Ian? And all of this was distracting, I admit, but not quite distracting enough to make us forget that this was a pretty low-key Q&A, really. The highlights were probably Ian deciding, seemingly in the spur of the moment, that players would be able to hide chest pieces on the transmog in the next update, which has since been expanded to all gear slots except pants, which is outrageous, frankly. That means I should probably rescue Tapatos from his neglected leveling hell now that he can dress as God intended, i.e. in basically nothing at all, and a promise of even more relaxing of transmog rules to come. There was also the promise that there is going to be a new Caverns of Time portal, which was obviously going to happen, and most interestingly of all, talk of a genuine level squish in WoW in the future.
This is something we're talking about a lot. We've floated the idea of a level squish a couple times in the past. It's something we're talking about very seriously at the moment internally, and trying to maybe get back to a world where, you know, we condense the current experience into simply fewer levels. Like, what if instead of going to 120, you went to 60 again?
And in my opinion, it's actually a pretty big deal that this is even a topic of conversation in a Q&A, because make no mistake, okay, if Ian is talking about this now, and so thoroughly, this shit is happening. The existing levels condensed down into a much more manageable number, which will bring with it the obvious benefit of an easier and probably quicker leveling experience, and a more meaningful one, as there would be less huge gaps between actually getting new abilities or talents. And yes, I think this could be happening as soon as next expansion. I feel there's like a whole separate discussion to have about this topic, but I just wanted to put it out there, because with all the other excitement this week, it isn't something that people have been talking about. And I think we should, because I genuinely believe this is happening, so be ready. I'd actually love to hear your thoughts about it, especially as I don't have time to talk about it now, because that's quite enough dicking around. Let's get to my favourite story of the week, the massive ban hammer that has come crashing down en masse all over the player base, taking in world famous players and content creators in the process. It transpired that draft of 10 lands, the 10% leveling buff potion that can be purchased with service medals and sent to your alts, could have its effects stacked to a pretty much unlimited degree if they were drunk in a certain way. Because if you just clicked on your stack of potions multiple times, you would consume multiple potions, but the effect would just refresh itself as intended. If, though, you separated out the drafts individually before consuming them, which is a known exploit with certain other items, then each potion's buff would stack. So you could drink seriously like 40, 70 of these things and then level at an absolutely insanely increased rate. Now, the most important thing to say here, the thing that trumps anything else, is that this is clearly an exploit. It's obviously not intended, you obviously wouldn't do it by mistake, and if you exploit, then you always run the risk of getting punished. That's all an absolute given, and it's definitely the most important part of this story. But it's not the only part of this story, because there's the part where Blizzard took 2 days to fix this bug, during which time they didn't reply to any of the many tweets asking for clarification that this was an exploit or not. They didn't mention it in the Q&A even. And yes, that is obviously because if they had done either of those things, then it would have drawn even more attention to the exploit, and as we'll see, Blizzard see broadcasting an exploit as being considerably worse than just using one. But nonetheless, it gave the impression that perhaps they just didn't care about the bug, so there is potentially a communication issue, and also possibly a Blizzard being a bit shit issue, because let's get totally real here. Are you telling me that they can eventually fix the stacking problem with this potion, but still didn't manage to add an actual timer to the buff? So I never know how long I've actually got left on it, because that's the real problem with draft of 10 lands, people, and I will gladly die on that hill. There's also the argument that just leveling a character or two isn't game breaking and really doesn't affect other players' experiences, and that some of the bans that went out were seemingly disproportionately harsh. Some very high-profile players like friend of the show, Preach, and Josh from Method have been hit with 30-day suspensions, and they are not the only ones. So this is going to have an impact on the Mythic Dungeon Invitationals, because there's a lot of teams missing players right now. This ban wave has touched thousands of accounts. Even Immortalis Argent Dawn EU, the world first guild in the world called Immortalis, has had players banned. So, you know, it goes all the way to the top is what I'm saying. And underneath all of that is that suspicion, that vague feeling that I think all WoW players have experienced in one form or another over the last couple of years, a feeling I like to call actispition. The nagging feeling that this decision has been taken with a slightly less wholesome aim than stamping out a mere exploit. I'm starting to think Blizzard makes the leveling process so miserable to increase the $60 buys for the boost. Cuts into their booster sales, you know, $60 a pop, can't have that. Blizzard protecting 110 character boosts, Activision needs that microtransactions money. And yeah, I don't mind admitting, fam, my actispition sense is tingling big time, and I wouldn't blame you if yours was too. Like, why have Blizzard been dishing out such long suspensions for something so seemingly harmless? It's probably worth pointing out that most bans are a couple of days with no level rollback so far. And if this really was about Blizzard protecting their level boosts, why did Josh and Preach get hit so hard when they streamed themselves leveling characters from 110 to 120, which is outside the realms that a boost can even affect? It suggests that it wasn't the levels gained that those two got punished for. Obviously, it was the broadcasting of it. And this has always been the way. Blizzard take exploits pretty seriously, but they take people who advertise and spread exploits way more seriously. And look, Mike will be the first to say that he messed up and he shouldn't have done it. And that's genuine, because I spoke to him before this ban even happened, and he was really regretting doing it because he knew he goofed, and he takes that kind of thing very seriously because he's an absolute legend. Likewise with Josh, he knew he was breaking terms of service and was joking about it on his stream as thousands of viewers typed banned in his chat. Josh's stream almost certainly encouraged others to exploit as well, and that got more people banned. And that's why in their cases those 30-day punishments were dished out. Do I think it's too harsh? Yeah, absolutely. Am I surprised it happened though? No, and I don't think anyone else is either. There is, of course, a completely separate conversation to be had as to whether people would have felt the need to exploit at all if leveling wasn't so boring, man. And whereas, yes, that is a totally separate conversation, people did undeniably have a lot of fun exploiting this bug, because leveling super fast is fun. I had a ball in the Legion pre-expansion event, but let's be honest, exploiting is kind of super fun too, isn't it? Especially when everyone else is doing it. So, in conclusion, I wish this hadn't happened. I wish a ton of people hadn't got banned, and I wish the reactions weren't so predictable. It's no surprise to me that the same people who are crying about a free game time weekend are saying that this is all Blizzard's fault, while bosses like Preach are holding their hands up and taking responsibility. As usual, the truth probably lies somewhere in between, doesn't it? But hey, best case scenario, Blizzard take on board how energized the player base was for a couple of days while leveling was so much faster. Preach says he thinks subs got a bump while it was happening because people were genuinely excited. Maybe Blizzard can bear that in mind going forward, who knows? Basically, all I'm saying when all's said and done is, as one of the biggest channels left that can still actually play this game right now, if I don't see an increase in Twitch viewers next week, I'm gonna be really pissed off, you know? Like, really pissed off. Oh! Evitel, you're back! What a lovely surprise! We weren't expecting you to be in this episode at all. So glad you could make it. Well, you must be very tired from the flight, but I'm glad that you totally agree with everything I said. That's really good. I'm sure you'll be much more energetic next episode. Thanks for coming. And thank you for joining us today. If you liked this episode, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make these videos happen, to make all of our videos happen, and without them there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it, and remember, my name is Preach Gaming. No, my name is Taliesin. From me and Evitel, until next time, cheerio.